Hi everyone, welcome to week 2 of our aesthetics course. So yes, I am feeling much better and I have my voice back. I still have a little bit of a cough, so bear with me, but otherwise doing much better. Um, as far as the class goes, everything seems to be running okay. I know there was a few technical um, issues that a few of you experienced, so hopefully we're working those out. I have received all of your mood board projects, the visual mission statement project. So I will be grading those between today and tomorrow, particularly tomorrow. That'll be my focus. And so you should see some feedback on those very soon. Here's something to keep in mind with those projects. The way I work these assignments is that I will give you feedback directly on your document. And I'll upload the document to FSO. Go ahead and download that new copy and open it up and take a look at the feedback that I have in there. And then you can, what I allow is for you to go in and make any changes that are necessary based on my feedback. And then when you turn in the next week's section, I'll look at the new section again, or the old section, and revise that original grade based on the changes that you've made, and you can re-earn up to 10 points based on those revisions. One thing I do ask is that if you do make changes to an older section, let me know. Make a note when you upload your new document for the following week, just so I know to go back and look, because I don't want to be hunting for little small edits here and there if I don't know that it's been changed. And sometimes some students choose to go back and do that work, some do not. So instead of leaving it up to guesswork, just go ahead and let me know. And just a little note to say, even if it's just as much as saying I've made some edits to the week 1 assignment. But my attitude is that this allows you to learn. I think learning is an ongoing process, and so instead of giving you a one-time judgment and grade, I'll point out where the issues are and give you some guidance in how to correct it. And I know sometimes this assignment is a little new territory for a lot of people, so instead of throwing you into the deep end, try to make it a little smoother. But the mood board is a planning tool. Again, it's a way of getting your creative direction before you actually get your hands onto the software, the creation tools. And what you'll find is in the industry, this kind of thing is really essential, because if you're working with a client, you want to make sure you have an idea of where you're headed before you invest a lot of time and man-hour into creating video assets and graphics and coding websites or whatever the case may be. And this way you avoid all of that ahead of time. If you're developing a mood board for a client, you would share this. So I'm kind of your imaginary client this time. If I can look at your mood board and say, okay, I get an idea of where you're headed with this, I can tell. If it was something you're creating for me, I could say, yes, this meets my vision and my needs. Go forward, move ahead with the project. So it's a way of getting your creative direction up front, also a way of saving money, because budget is everything. We do have the next exploration due tonight, as usual. That's our Tuesday night assignment. So be on the lookout for that. And then otherwise, the week should run basically on the same schedule as the previous week. If you do have any questions or anything's not clear, let me know. If you are still running into any kind of software issues, let me know that as well, and hopefully we can get those worked out. So this week we are shifting gears a little bit. If you watched the lecture from last week, you'll remember that the way we defined aesthetics is the interaction of media elements and the perceptual reaction to that combination of elements. So we looked at story and image last week. Now we're adding a new element, and that is color. And we're going to have a bit of a crash course in formal color theory and a little bit of color psychology. Color psychology is a little iffy. I'll talk about that a little bit, but really want to focus on color theory. And if you have any background in art, then this might be review. for you. It'll be familiar territory, but I think for most of you this might be new information. We're all familiar with color. We've all probably done some painting or coloring or color pencils or what have you, but having a knowledge of how colors work together and how they interact with one another is really valuable, because it lets you plan ahead and know how to create a given impression or create a given visual look and feel, energy. So this is the basic color wheel that you see here. This is the standard color wheel. There's a couple of variations on this depending on whether you're using paint or ink, or if you're using electronic medium like a digital display or a projector, because one is based on pigments, physical pigments, the other is based on colored light, and that plays an effect. But this is the most basic standard color wheel that you would encounter in an art classroom. Most of them are going to be roughly the same as this. The colors shift a little bit for the additive colors, which is the paints, or subtractive colors, which is the visual, the digital color wheel. But it's very, very subtle. So what we have, you've probably seen this at some point. You may have gotten a basic education on how it works. You have the primary colors, red, yellow, blue. Those are mixed together to create secondary colors, which would be green, violet, orange. And then there's tertiary colors that are in between. So that's, say, yellow-green, blue-green, blue-violet, magenta or violet-red, and so on. You can break that down into tiny, tiny gradients, which if you open Photoshop's color picker, you'll see that it's a continuous gradient from one color to another. These are arranged actually in a meaningful way. For one thing, the colors are all grouped together according to their similarity, and they kind of fade one into the next. But that similarity is based on how our vision system works, our actual perceptions, our eyes, our optic nerves, and so forth. The reason colors are opposites is because they are literally competing for your color receptors. And I don't want to get too much into the anatomy of your eyeballs and the way all that works, and wavelengths and so on. But what you'll see is this has some interesting effects in our day-to-day life. This is something that anybody that wears cosmetics will be familiar with. What do you do when you have dark circles under your eyes? You use concealer, right? And you pick the color concealer based on the color of the dark circles under your eyes. Yellow neutralizes purple. Interestingly enough, purple neutralizes yellow. The same with red and green. And orange neutralizes blue. There isn't a blue that neutralizes orange, because I guess that just doesn't occur, but those colors don't happen by chance. If you look at this, blue and orange are opposites on the color wheel, right here. Red and green, opposites on the color wheel. Yellow and purple are opposites. Those are called complementary colors. They cancel each other out because your eye cannot perceive them both together, so they're neutralized. They become a neutral color. So it becomes your skin tone. For cosmetics, also the same thing. If you've ever done hair color, you know that toner will get rid of brassiness and so forth. But it works the same way with paint. It also works the same way with projected media or a digital display. Those complementary colors cancel each other out if they're mixed. But if they're placed right next to each other, instead, you get a really dramatic, a really dynamic contrast. If you ever hear somebody say those colors really pop, that's what they're seeing, is that contrast between those complementary colors. So, in effect, when you're picking colors for a design, whether it's a logo design or even a scene in a movie, this this is something to keep in mind. Do you want it to be really energetic and dynamic looking and really pop? If so, then get out your color wheel and pick colors that are opposites one another. Colors that are suitable for that situation, but ones that are going to contrast. If you'd rather have it more calm, more sedate, doesn't necessarily have to be super calming necessarily, but you don't want that really dramatic energy, then you pick colors that are closer together. Those are called analogous, which means that they are similar essentially. So those are that's the basic rules. Colors that are opposites on the color wheel really pop, really have a strong contrast and energy. Those that are close together are more sedate, more calm, more refined, more harmonious. If we keep those rules in mind, then when you look at media, you can see how they've been applied. This is a movie poster. We're going to be looking at a lot of movie posters this week for our exploration. So instead of advertisements, now we're looking at movie posters, because movie posters really apply color as a way of conveying the tone of the film. This is like your mood board project. They're trying to communicate the entire story and feel of that movie in a single image, with a title, and color plays a big part in that. This is Amelie, if you've ever seen this movie. It's a really nice film. And you see red and green as the colors. Those are complementary. She's in the red sweater, and in order to make her really stand out and be the center of attention, they've put a green background behind her, because they understand that those colors will give that pop, that sense of contrast, and make her stand out. And you can see the difference. This is a version I photoshopped to eliminate that contrast. And so now you see that it just doesn't have the same energy. It feels more kind of calm, but almost sort of too reserved. She almost comes across as much more meek. And that's the effect that these have. And you'll see that across the board. Like I was saying, whether it's web design or logo design or planning a scene in a film, even this design of a news broadcast, the studio takes this into account. I don't think I have a slide for it. I might later, but pay attention when you watch the news. Notice that the backdrop is always a cool color, usually blue. And the reason being that every human skin tone is a warm color. It's on that warm side. Actually, let's jump ahead. It's on this warm side of the color wheel. So it will automatically stand out against that cool black background. So when that newscaster is talking, they stand out. They are the center of your focus. They'll make that backdrop look like a city skyline or a bunch of monitors or something, but it's purposely done. And there's a little bit of a tangent and a little bit of digression, but it's relevant because this plays a part in almost every kind of visual media. So I mentioned warm versus cool colors. You're probably familiar with this, but if you divide the color wheel in half, basically between, what would that be, red, violet, and green. Actually, I could probably shift this line so that it splits the yellow-green in half and the red-violet in half. Everything over here is the cool colors. That's the blues, the violets, greens. Those colors that call to mind the thoughts of water, ice, general just coldness and coolness. The physical sensation of coolness, not the social status of being cool. And the opposite side is the warm colors. These are yellows, oranges, reds, colors that call to mind warmth, of heat, of fire. If You turn on the burner on your stove, it turns red, and that's intuitively becomes connected with feelings of warmth. So you'll hear these referred to as warm colors and cool colors. When you take opposite colors, for those complementary colors, you're almost always picking one cool color and one warm color to pair together, and that creates that really dynamic, contrasting energy. Warm colors tend to appear visually to pop forward towards the viewer, even if it's a two-dimensional image. So they will tend to be more eye-catching. That's, again, I said tend to because it's not always the case, but tends to be the case that they will be where your eye is drawn. And they usually give a sense of action or excitement or energy and dynamic motion. Cool colors are the opposite. They tend to recede away visually and give a more calm or subdued feeling. Not necessarily calm in a good way, it can be depressed, but it can also be very serene. It just really depends on the context. So you can get the idea that if you have those two paired together, the warm color is going to pop forward, the cool color is going to recede away. So it gives a sense of depth, distance, and also helps to call attention to that warm colored object. I'm going to look at some specific examples of this. Okay, so now that we have those basic rules in mind, the analogous colors, the complementary colors, we can start looking at some of the basic color relationships. These are, when an artist sits down to do a painting or do a graphic design or what have you, they decide on a color palette, and that influences the overall impression of that piece of media, that design, that painting, what have you. The most basic is monochromatic. And monochromatic means single color. Mono being one, chroma being color, so monochromatic, one color. That means that only one color is used in that entire piece of media. There is no other color used. There might be lighter and darker varieties of that color. So in this painting by Picasso, you can see that there's really, really light tints of blue, and there's some really dark shades of blue, but it's all blue. There's no green, there's no red, there's no other colors. The entire thing's blue. This usually can have a very elegant look. It can also be depressed depending on the colors you choose and what is shown in the picture. It doesn't have a lot of color richness, obviously. You can still get a sense of depth, as you can do shadow and light. And depending on if you're using cool colors or warm colors, it can either be more calm or more energetic. But it won't have that dramatic pop of color that you would see if you had complementary colors. So it's really limited, but it can create some really interesting visuals. Here are some examples from the movie poster world. Harry Potter, I think this is from one of the Deathly Hallows films. Nope, this would be the Half-Blood Prince, because there is Dumbledore. Any case, all this blue, it gives that cold feeling. It looks like there's snow actually in the scene. So it feels very cold. Those movies start getting really dark at that point, so it gives that subdued feel, that kind of depressed and ominous feel that starts coming into the storyline at that point. On the opposite side, the warm color side, is Gladiator. Also very ominous feeling, mostly because of all the shadow that's used. But that warm, monochromatic yellow, kind of yellow-orange, it looks like fire. It almost looks like the entire sky is on fire. It's very, it has that combination of energy and kind of grim grittiness at the same time. And that's really goes along with the story of that movie. If you've seen that movie, it's a kind of a tale of his quest to get revenge, and has a lot of really, it's very violent, and it has some kind of dark elements to So monochromatic is the most basic color scheme. And the most important thing to remember is that it's only one color. If you see multiple different colors, then it's not monochromatic anymore. It has multiple colors. And as I mentioned before, the two basic color relationships, once you have more than one color, is either complementary or analogous. It's either opposites on the color wheel or close to opposites, or they're real close together, in which case it's analogous. Complementary colors, and this is kind of a review of stuff I've kind of already touched on, but they are opposite on the color wheel. They have very stark contrast, which gives that dynamic pop of excitement. And they are intensified when cool colors and warm colors are placed next to each other, which you're almost always going to have a cool color and a warm color unless you pick colors that are literally right on the line, between the two. Analogous colors are close together, they're more harmonious, less energetic. They can be exciting, but they don't have that action movie pop of color. Okay, here's some examples. Oh, this is analogous. This is a painting by Claude Monet. I like to show these classical art pieces first because you can see how it all connects. These same principles were used in traditional art, and they're still used in media arts. So here you have these cool colors, a lot of green, a lot of yellow-green, some blue, very calm. And this is the Japanese bridge in a garden in France, I assume. I don't know exactly where, but the colors aren't that different from one another. There's a variety of colors, but they're relatively similar so that the calmness and the serenity is maintained. Here are some examples from our movie posters. Bug's Life, almost the same color palette as the Monet painting. Blue, yellow, or kind of a greenish yellow and green. Has a kind of it's fun because of the imagery, but it's calm, kind of more subdued because of the color. So it's that interplay. You really have to look at the color, the context of the images that are used, as well as the color, because yes, warm colors will tend to be exciting, but they aren't necessarily. You can see very romantic scenes that are all warm colors that you wouldn't call action-packed. However, the Incredibles, or Les Indestructibles, in this case, I think I somehow found the French version of this poster. Does have some excitement. It is analogous, warm colors, orange, red, yellow. And because we have the superheroic poses, we have this sort of burst of light coming out from behind them. It takes on more of an action feel. So again, look at the context, but you see how that is used. A lot of times with action films, you'll see complementary colors used. And in fact, pay close attention to blockbuster films, like all the Avengers films and Transformers and things like that. You'll see almost across the board blue and orange complementary colors, which is exactly what we have here. This is the cafe. I can't remember the exact name. It's something along the lines of Cafe at Night. This is by Vincent van Gogh. And notice what I was talking about before. The orange is a warm color, is where the cafe is lit at night, so it's the well-lit section, and it really pops out. You can see how it jumps forward, whereas the city, which is still in blue, it's the dark of night, recedes away. This allows Van Gogh to really call attention to this center section. Our eye is drawn here. We might take in the rest of it after the fact, but really this is our focus. This is a little bit of a side note, but also look at other ways he's used to draw attention to that spot. Look at these lines in the street. They all converge right here, even in the buildings. all these lines converge right at the center. It's like he's doing everything he can to point us at this center table with this couple. That's an idea of composition, which you'll get into more in the graphic design class, I think. But he's using these lines of perspective, even the tables drawing your eye to this point. Those are called leading lines. We don't really cover that in depth here, but it's something to keep in mind. If you look at movies, especially I think Stanley Kubrick films, use leading lines everywhere. You look at The Shining, you look at 2001: A Space Odyssey, a lot of those long hallways, they direct your eye exactly where they want you to look. But we're talking about color, so it's a little bit of a tangent, but this is a good place to start because orange and blue is the most well-loved complementary color combination, it seems. You'll see it, of course I don't have the examples now that I've been talking about it, but these are some of the rare counter examples that use other complementary pairings. You can see this very dramatic feel in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. with the Parthenon. No, that is not. That's the Colosseum of Rome. In red with the teal background, creates that really dramatic pop of color. The Alice in Wonderland poster uses a very similar technique to what we saw with Amelie. The Mad Hatter's hair is this bright orange, kind of red-orange, and that's going to stand out against the green background because of this complementary color relationship. There's a lot of color going on here, but what really gives it the energy is that contrast between the red and the green. All right, let me back up. Oh, oops, wrong direction. So analogous and complementary colors are our basic color schemes. That's what I really want you to keep in mind. There are other color relationships. We talked about monochromatic. There's also things like split complementary. If you have, in fact, this would be split complementary because you have two warm colors and a cool color. But there's still a color, it still is based on a complementary relationship. So we don't have to get too much into those little variations. And there's triadic, which is basically three colors that are equidistant, so you don't have opposites at that point. But really, for our purposes this month, I really want you to focus on complementary versus analogous and monochromatic as sort of a third option. And there's another option, though, that I do want you to be aware of, and that's called achromatic. Achromatic means, remember, chroma means color, so achromatic means no color. This is black and white. It's grayscale. It is completely lacking color. Black and white are not considered colors in formal color theory. They are pure value. So value is lightness and darkness. So pure black is absolute, the absolute lack of any value. Well, that's not the right way. It's the darkest value. White is the lightest value in terms of brightness and darkness. In Photoshop, you'll see that referred to as lightness or darkness, or lightness on the little slider. If you have an all achromatic image, that means there is no color. Just like with monochromatic, mean there's only one color. In this case, there's no color at all. None. As a result, you don't have the energy that's provided by the color relationships. So you don't have that dynamic contrast. You don't have that sense of warmth given by warm colors or coolness given by cool colors. It is completely neutral in terms of the energy. It tends to be a little more low-key. It can be very depressed in its mood, but again, that really depends on what's depicted in the imagery. This is a pen and ink illustration by M.C. Escher. It's pretty neutral in terms of its mood as well. It's just an interesting looking image. But if you have something like a lot of these really serious, gritty spy films or police dramas, you'll see this used because it gives that sense of kind of depressed drama. Sometimes a lot of the post-apocalyptic films like The Road uses this as well because it is that more grim feel. But it can also be very elegant. This Fast and Furious 7 uses this, and this is an interesting case because this Fast and Furious films are action films, and they're usually very exciting. You would probably see a lot of orange and blue in any other installment of this series, but Furious 7 was the film in which one actor was killed during the production. I can't think of his name, and I apologize for that. But Vin Diesel, they were very close friends in real life, and so this poster actually serves as a memorial for that actor. So they use this very almost completely achromatic. There's a little tiny bit of color, but it's so toned down, and it is in order to give that feel. Even the, speaking of context, look at the expressions. Think about the visual storytelling aspect. With Vin Diesel looking down, looking very morose and sad. So when you have this imagery using that subdued color, enhances that. It's almost like the musical score that goes along with a scene. It underscores what you're already feeling. And the trick that you can do with achromatic imagery is to throw in a little splash of color, and that's called an accent. And it's very limited, so you don't want it to dominate the image, but it draws attention to that particular spot. This is a scene from the movie Schindler's List. The little girl is the only thing that's ever in color in the entire film, and it has a lot of symbolic meaning because she shows up and suddenly there's this color that hasn't been there before. And you can use that for less symbolic purposes. You can use it simply to draw attention to a button on a website or a product in an advertisement. But it allows you to really direct attention in a very powerful way. So that's color theory. That's the idea of really paying attention to which colors you're using and how they interact with one another. Color psychology is another matter altogether. Color psychology is the study of how colors affect our moods, the symbolic meaning they have within our culture, and within our language. So you'll sometimes see breakdowns of that specifically prescribe colors to specific meanings, and this is a little overdone. It doesn't work quite that well. It's not like reading your horoscope or looking at the dream dictionary to see what does it mean when you dream you're falling in a dream. It's not like that. It again depends on the context. It depends on the culture that you're dealing with, but it also depends on how it's used in the image itself. So let's take a look at an example. This is an advertisement. So much red, right? Red in our culture, in American culture, is often a symbol of danger or hazard, a warning. You think of stop signs and warning signs, but it's also commonly associated with strong emotion, passion, and love, desire, for instance. Think about Valentine's Day. This is largely a learned thing. It's simply that's the color, that's the meaning that it has in our culture. If you were in China, for instance, the color red is the color of good fortune. It's you give the red envelopes on the Chinese New Year, usually with a little gift of money, and that's for good fortune in the coming year. When a baby is born, I was told once that they color eggs red, like we do Easter eggs, for a similar meaning. It's good fortune for the new baby. But in this ad, it's really leveraging that idea of red as the color of desire, of strong passion and emotion. rekindle the flame of desire. You only need 1 drop of petrol. So you have this red car that's kind of sporty looking. You have the red background, and then the wording is talking about the flame of desire. So you have flame, which is the warm color to begin with, and desire. So it all connects. The color helps to drive home that idea of desire for this sporty car. And you'll see that kind of idea used again and again. This is a movie poster for the movie The Change Up. You have literally divided in half, warm versus cool colors. You have Jason Bateman, and he's struggling with these little infants, and very, very troubled expression. He's obviously not having the best time of this. And the color that is highlighting him is blue. It's sort of that teal blue, that cool color with the subdued mood. Ryan Reynolds, on the other hand, it has the 2 young women with him and much more positive expression on his face, and that's paired with the warm orange, which is warm color, more energetic, more upbeat. So direct is kind of a very blatant use of color to create moods. Usually it's a little more subtle than this. And this is something that is commonly done. If you've watched the series Breaking Bad, and this is just an example, this could be any TV show and any movie, they made use of color in every scene of this series. There's a quote down here by Vince Gilligan, who created the series. It says, "I want to do the color timing for each of these episodes where you sit with the colorist and make sure that the color of each individual scene is just the way you want it." So you see that this isn't just left to chance. What he's talking about is the color of the lighting, yes, but also the colors that they're wearing, the clothes, the color of the room they're in, the furniture in the room, the car they're driving, what have you. It all plays a part. Sometimes it's very symbolic, and you see that with really high concept filmmakers like David Lynch and Aronofsky and so on. But even when it's more straightforward story, they still want to use color to set the mood. What this infographic shows is basically someone has watched all of the episodes in the entire series and recorded the colors associated with each character, each of the main characters in each of those episodes. Crazy amount of work, right? But it's great for us to look at, because if you haven't seen the show, the character Jesse Pinkman, he's young, he's very brash, he's a hothead, he runs off at the mouth a lot, and it's just really, every other word is a curse word. But he goes through a lot of character development throughout the series. Not surprisingly, if we look at his timeline, a lot of warm colors in there. There's a reason they call him a hothead. Somebody a hothead, it's those warm colors. Red, a lot of yellow. But let's take a look at some key moments where you see some shifts in color. Starting with, let's go right here at number 3. There's a little tiny legend down here at the bottom. It might be too small for you to read on your side, but at number 3, point number 3, you see this red block, and then it suddenly goes dark. At that point, he is abducted by Tuco, and Tuco is this kind of drug boss. He's a bad guy. He's crazy. So things are not going well for Jesse Pinkman at that point, and the colors associated with him go right along with that. The color is gone, in fact. It goes dark. That might be what he's wearing. It might be the room he's in. Maybe he's in the dark. Maybe he's being held in a dark room. I don't remember. I did watch the show, but I don't remember what happened at that point. But it's, you see that illustrated right here, how that changed. Another good one is at point number 5, where you have red. Another block of red. So you can imagine he's, being his usual self, being very, very volatile. At point 5, Jane dies. I should say spoiler alert. There's going to be some mild spoilers. So his girlfriend dies at that point, and the color goes out of his life. It goes to this kind of gray-green. All of this energy is now gone. And then it goes from that gray-green to black and gray. And at point number 6, and at that point he goes into rehab. So it's kind of like a real low point in his life. Things have really shifted for him. And you see that shift continue. There's some spurts of warm color, but you get a lot of that achromatic after that point because his character really changes. And the color really goes along with that. We could dissect Walter White, who's the main character as well. Marie pretty much stays consistently purple. But you can see how they really manipulated that color in order to influence your perception of those characters. Another example where this is really well used is in the film The Matrix. Maybe I should say spoiler alert again. This is pretty old if you haven't seen The Matrix. Shame on you, because it's pretty cool. In the first film, we don't really, if you haven't, when you're first watching it, you don't really know what's going on. There's this very dark environment where there's obviously something very dramatic happening. The police are coming after these people. The heroes are on the run. But what you learn is that they're not actually in the real world. They're in simulated, like a computer simulation. But they don't even necessarily know it. The main character doesn't know it at first. We don't know it as the audience. But we see that everything is tinted this very unnatural, unearthly green. Even Morpheus' skin tone has this green cast that's not something we would see in nature. So we know that something's not right. It just feels eerie and off. We don't really know why, though, until the reveal of the fact that they're in the Matrix, which is this artificial world. When they get out of the Matrix, suddenly we see natural colors, we see natural skin tones. It looks more alive, more lifelike, more natural and vital. This particular scene, have been at basically a huge celebration, so they're very sweaty from dancing and so forth. But so that kind of makes it an extreme case, but this is true in all of the scenes where they are in the quote real world outside of the Matrix. And it's a visual cue that something has changed. And then there's a third setting. When they leave the safety of their home in this post-apocalyptic world, go out where the machines are, the robots that they're fighting against, now it becomes this cold steel gray, like cement and steel and hard stone. It's very cold and very uncaring and very lifeless, and that's done intentionally because they want you to feel isolated. They want you to feel this sense of lifelessness that exists in this world that they find themselves in, and they do that through the use of color. You can also set the sense of time. We think of old-timey days being either in black and white or in the sepia tone that's used in this scene. This is from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Because it looks like everything looks antique. Of course, we know that people didn't actually see the world through a sepia lens back in the 1920s, but psychologically it tells us this is happening in an older time. Here we go. Finally, I have the Hollywood blockbuster, and you can see the use of that complementary color combination. Blue sky in the background, explosion and Iron Man's red and gold armor really popping forward, using those warm colors to really make him stand out. Of course, Tony Stark's armor is red and gold. That's a given. The designer didn't have any control over that. But they did have control over what they put in the background to make him stand out, make him really pop. And that's what they've done. And you'll see that in not only in the movie posters, but in the movie scenes. If you look at the Transformers film, that those robots are usually some warm color and paired against the blue sky or something kind of a blue-gray concrete background and so forth. Even in web design, you'll apply these. This is complementary kind of teal, blues and greens paired with warm oranges. Gives that energy, that excitement, and goes along with the mood and the tone of this website. It's you see very lighthearted stuff like this child with the mustache scribbled on, and slogans like great websites, no lame marketing slogans. So it's obviously very tongue-in-cheek, and they want to have a fun feel to go along with that, and the color helps support that. Okay. I've talked a little bit about using color to direct attention with the achromatic, using the splash of color, using complementary colors. For example, what's the first thing your eye is drawn to? It's that kind of pink-red mushroom against the field of green lichen or moss, because those are complementary colors. This is the part that's different. It's different from the background, so it stands out. Your eye is drawn there. This is actually a photo I think a friend posted on Instagram, but it was a great example because this is happening in nature. This is real life. But you can use that in your media creations. This is from the more recent live action production of Cinderella. The blue gown really stands out against this gold. Gold is essentially yellow on the color wheel, yellow and orange. They didn't have to have an orange coach or gold coach for her to ride in, but knowing that this gown was going to be blue and they wanted you to look at Cinderella, use that complementary color to direct your attention. Harry Potter, you might be picking up on the idea that I'm a Harry Potter fan, and that's definitely the case, but you'll see this a lot too. Harry's flying on his broomstick in the Quidditch match, and he's got the red Gryffindor robes. So in order to make him stand out and remain the center of our focus, they put him against a green backdrop. Even these towers are kind of yellow-green, so he's always going to contrast. He's always going to draw your eye and your attention. That was done very purposely. Draco Malfoy is in the green Slytherin robes. Even though he's closer to us, he doesn't grab our visual attention as readily as that red does. So, this is an example of from Harry Potter, but this is used in countless movies. A really great example is, and I don't think I have the screenshot, but the movie The Life of Pi, where he's on the orange lifeboat and has the orange raft, contrasted against the blue of the ocean and the blue of the sky, because he's basically trapped on a life raft in the middle of the ocean through almost the entire film. That is a way of directing your attention. In fact, the reason that lifeboats are orange is specifically because they contrast with the ocean, and so people search and rescue when they're out looking for survivors, they can more easily spot them. But in film, in media, this is used. Here's that example I was talking about with the newscasts. Look at that background in both cases. It looks like there's something important going on, but it's really nothing. It's really just backdrop. That helps to maintain your focus. And color is used, a lot of the same principles that we've talked about already are used for branding, for creating the visual impression of a given brand. This is going to be the part that that's going to be really relevant to your mood board project. So really give some attention to this. Brands rely on color as much as they rely on symbolism in their logos. A brand is not just a logo, a brand is the entire personality of that particular company or product. And here's an example that will show you how much That is true. I reversed the color schemes. I didn't reverse the color schemes. They have been reversed. This is something I discovered online. Um, but look how much of an impression how much that changes the impression. Without the green, Starbucks becomes less recognizable. We're so familiar with that green logo. And that's the important part of a brand, is that it's recognizable, that you see that and you immediately know whose that is, that is Starbucks coffee. So it's very important to establish a consistent color scheme for your brand. That's what you're going to be doing with the mood board assignment. You're creating your personal brand by picking these color schemes. So the colors that we pick in this week's mood board, the visual mission statement assignment, are going to be your brand colors. You can change these at any point, but for this month, you're picking these colors to be your brand colors. Another example, FedEx and UPS, two competitors. UPS even relies on that color. They call it the brown and gold of their logo. It's part of their identity. And when you take that away, suddenly it doesn't feel right. It doesn't look right. It's not as recognizable. Ayers Full Sails. This is actually from the Full Sail Style Guide that is owned by Platinum Creative, our marketing department. Whenever they are creating new media, whether it's publications or business cards or letterhead or a new video, whatever, they refer to this style guide because it codifies exactly what colors they use. Our colors are this kind of burnt orange and this, it looks like olive green. If you actually analyze this, it's a dark shade of yellow, kind of drifting towards the green side. But you have kind of a green and orange contrast. It's almost a warm versus cool contrast. The metallic silver is sort of a secondary color they rarely use. Sometimes it's used, you'll see it at graduation ceremonies, and in some of the, I think the printed catalogs have this as well. But for the most part, that orange and ochre, I'm going to call it ochre, are our main colors. You see that in the logo. You'll see that this is from the course catalog. Notice how they've used that greenish kind of olive background, ochre background, I'm not really sure what to call that color, as the field upon which the orange acts. It stands out. Even the little page numbers are highlighted with the orange. Color psychology does play a big part in branding. However, and I'm going to emphasize this, again, you can't necessarily say, well, blue is always a symbol of dependability, orange is always cheerful, green is always a symbol of health, because it's not always the case. We're not quite this cut and dry. Our brains don't work that way. It's always about the context and the culture that you're operating within. One thing, if I can say that there is a trend I've noticed, it is that more traditional business-like brands, maybe more conservative brands, use more of the primary colors, so yellow, red, blue, whereas those that are more non-traditional or more, have more personality in a kind of a quirky sense, start to get into the tertiary colors, so more of the unusual colors, secondary and tertiary colors. Let's look at some examples. So with that in mind, yellow, which is usually warmth and clarity, take that with a grain of salt. But look at some of the examples. We have IMDb, Nikon, Best Buy, Hertz, Yahoo. Maybe the most fun among these is McDonald's and Subway, but for the most part, these are pretty serious. National Geographic, which is a fairly reserved publication. Blue, we have HP, JP Morgan, Okay, Oreo, which is fun, but it's almost the exception. But then if we look at purple or green, you get a lot more of these more unusual things like Sci-Fi Channel, Taco Bell. Um, I called this Yahoo. That's AIM. Um, Yahoo, Barbie, and so the more business-like brands like T-Mobile become the exception. In green, you have Monster Energy drink, Animal Planet. You have some very business-like examples because green is pretty traditional. So John Deere, BP, and actually we'll look at BP in a moment. Green, which they always associate with health or growth, can also be a sign of sickness. If you are, if your face turns green, usually it means you're sick or, you know, throwing up. It's is often green, or poison is often symbolized as green. So it's not always necessarily healthy. Um, and again, it just depends on the context. A lot of times, culturally, we think of green as being environmentally friendly, right? Because it's become a buzzword: green initiatives and green living. And in fact, it's no coincidence that BP has a green logo. They're a petroleum company, an oil company. They want to have a good public image. They don't want to be thought of as polluters and environmentally unfriendly. So what do they create? This flower, this very organic looking logo with green as the dominant color. Oops, let me go back. You'll notice that the color relationships still apply in branding. Intel uses all blue. It's monochromatic. White doesn't count because remember that's not a color. It's achromatic. It's blue. It's reserved. It's that primary color. Maybe we can say it's dependable, but regardless, they make business machines and they want to have a business-like brand identity. BP uses the analogous colors, the yellow, kind of the green end of the spectrum. But if you want to have something a little more exciting, then you start using those complementary colors. The Lakers using complementary golden and purple, and Firefox using orange and blue. This is actually orange, yellow, and blue for a split complementary, but what matters is complementary, warm and cool. And Burger King. Burger King actually uses a triadic color scheme, which I mentioned I didn't really get into, but it's the primary colors. So it has some contrast, some harmony. It's kind of a middle ground, but very recognizable. They are very consistent, and that's my next example, in using those colors. This is from an advertisement, but if you look at their website, oops, I thought I had a slide for this. If you look at their website, you'll see the same colors, and in fact the same design motifs. If you go to the store or the restaurant, you'll see posters in this same design idea with the same colors. On the packaging, same colors. It's consistent across the board, and that's how you create a brand identity with consistent colors, consistent logo, and consistent design visual style. So let me back up a little bit. So this week you're going to be picking your brand colors. How do you start that? Well, think about the visual impression that you want to make. What does your personal mission statement say about you? Are you high energy and dynamic? Are you traditional and businesslike? Or are you just more reserved? Or are you, do you have an environmental focus? Then that'll guide you in picking your first colors and the combinations. For example, if you do have a very ecological focus in your brand, green is a nice place to start. It makes sense. It's culturally appropriate for what we think of. You might stick with green and different shades of green, or you might bring in some other, quote, earth tones like browns, because that will give you a complementary color connection, because brown is actually usually a darker variety of red or orange or yellow. So paired with green would be complementary, so it gives you a little bit more of an exciting energy than using green alone. For example, if you are more, want to be seen as a more serious business-like media professional, then going with something like blue would be in order. You might stick with different shades of blue for a monochromatic color relationship, or if you want to have something really exciting, pair that blue with orange, or red and green. Then you have complementary colors, and you get some more excitement, more dynamic energy. Don't just pick colors that you like. You can start with colors that are your favorite colors, but have a good reason for the colors you pick. Just because your favorite color is fuchsia doesn't necessarily mean your brand should reflect that, because your clients might look at that and say, no, I'm not going with this person, they're just not serious enough. So consider the public image side of that as well, and how that will be perceived. When you do your write-up for your mood board, I will be looking for you to refer to either complementary or analogous or monochromatic or achromatic if that's the way you want to go. But I will be looking for you to pick one of those color relationships. And you will only use one. You can't use multiple color relationships because it just doesn't happen. If you have multiple colors, it's a very specific relationship. So pick one of those and base your color scheme on that. And if you do have any questions, be sure to send me an email, or you can try giving me a call. I'm usually online, so I can usually get back to email pretty quickly. You can either use my email address or FSO's messages. Otherwise, we'll be moving ahead. I'll be getting feedback to you on your first part of your projects by tomorrow, and hopefully have a good week.